Hello, my name's Mandy Cannell. I work for a local charity based here in the Isle of Man called MCH Psychological Services. We run a project called I Listen. Aside from the therapy that we provide at our centre, we also run training, both in the workplace and in schools. Today's short session will last around about 15 minutes, and in that I'm going to talk to you about adopting a flexible mindset. It's a topic that is particularly important at the moment with the advent of the coronavirus and all the uncertainty that that creates for us. I really do hope that you'll get something that you can take away from today's session and it will be of practical use to you. So let's get started. We'll start with what we're actually going to cover in today's session. We're going to start off by looking at the emotional reactions that we experience when we go through a difficult situation or a big change. Then we're going to think about how we might manage our responses and support our well-being through those times of uncertainty. And finally, we're going to look at a model called the circle of control and think about ways that we can perhaps change our perceptions and our behaviours so that they are more positive and support our well-being. Let's get started then with our first slide. So here we've deliberately chosen for you a photograph that shows rainy times, and it can feel a little bit like that at the moment. The sun might be shining outside, but we're dealing with really disruptive change. We're dealing with unprecedented change that not only affects ourselves and our loved ones, but everybody else around us. This is really different from anything any of us have ever experienced before. It's important to state that this is something new and we are all learning how to deal with it. It's really important as well to think about this not only in the context of COVID-19, but also in the context of any major change that we might be experiencing throughout our lives. We all go through a roller coaster in life and we have to deal with change all of the time, whether that's in our workplaces, in our schools, or whether it's in our personal life. Change is an inevitable part of life. So let's start off by having a look at what we go through when we deal with change. This is a model that was initially put together in 1969 by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She initially put this together to describe the stages, the emotional stages that somebody will travel through when experiencing grief. However, the change curve, as she calls it, is now being widely adopted and is really used to describe the different emotional stages and reactions that we have when experiencing any major life change. And that would include not only bereavement, but also major illness, major change, whether that's a breakup of a relationship, or one of those big life transitions that we might go through, starting a new job, moving to university, having a child, all of these different things. We could use this model and it would quite nicely describe the different stages that we are experiencing. So let me walk you through the model. We'll start off with the left-hand axis. You'll see there, starting from the low point up to the high point, this measures our emotional responses, our mood, if you like. On the bottom axis, we're measuring time and support. So let's start off with the first reaction. So when we first learn of or experience change, our initial reaction is one of shock. You can see quite quickly and quite steeply our mood begins to fall as we experience a sense of panic, of perhaps anger. We're trying to get to grips with what is happening. We might start to question why it's happening and ask why it's happening to us. Why is this happening at all? Why can't things just go back to the way that they used to be? So you can see all the while we're on that downward trajectory in terms of our mood. And we're hitting the very bottom there. We're perhaps even in denial at this stage. I can't believe what's happening. If I just ignore it, perhaps it'll all just go away. At this point, we enter the depression phase. And we're talking depression here, not necessarily in terms of clinical depression, but in terms of low mood and low energy. In the workplace, if somebody is experiencing some of these changes and some of these emotions, you will most likely see a drop in performance that mirrors that downward trajectory of mood as well. So at the bottom there, we hit the lowest point. And as I say, we might experience some resistance there to some change. We might not want to believe that it's all happening. We might dig our heels in and stubbornly refuse to move forward with that change. We don't want to accept the new reality that is out there. So as our bottom axis says, time and support is the thing that will get us through. Now, sometimes it might just be a matter of time, but support will inevitably help. And that might be talking to somebody. If it's in the workplace, it might be talking to your boss about the changes that are happening. If it's something that's happening in your personal life, it might be family and friends that you reach out to. It might even be somebody who is professional, like a counselor or a therapist. But with that support, and also with positive changes that you might decide to make yourself, then we can move out of that downward trajectory and start to move up again. So getting to a point where our mood is starting to lift as we begin to accept the new reality of our situation. We might even see that there are new opportunities created by that situation. And as we said, with the right kind of support and some time, we'll hopefully reach a place of renewed success and healing once more as we really fully integrate that new reality. Now, what's important to say with this model is that it will vary from person to person. We are all unique individuals. We all react to change in different ways. The way that we react to those changes will also depend on the scale and size of that change, of the degree to which it personally impacts us as well. So all of these different things will factor into how quickly and smoothly we might travel through that change curve. We might also find that we don't smoothly travel through that curve in one direction. We might actually slide back through the curve at times as well before we can ultimately move forward. So why am I showing you this model? Well, I think it's important for us to recognize and understand our own emotional responses through these big times of change. Firstly, to understand that this is a normal reaction. And secondly, so that we can reach out for the right kind of support that will help us to get through that change curve as successfully as we possibly can. The other reason that I show it to you is to support other people around you as well who may be experiencing change. So a change such as the coronavirus inevitably impacts other people around us, not just ourselves. So whether that's work colleagues or whether it's family and friends, there are people out there who may need our support and perhaps a listening ear to help them to get through the other side. I wanted to show you this model. It's a really simple idea and it looks at the different things that make us who we are. We've called it the blueprint for human behavior, and it's a really simple way of interpreting how we might be all different and how we might actually react to situations in a different way. Sometimes it can be really hard to acknowledge that not everybody is reacting to a situation in the same way as us. We might all be experiencing exactly the same circumstances, but our reactions to them can be very different. So why is that? Well, it starts off with the input. So this is what we call, on the left-hand side of our model here, the stimuli. These are all of the different factors that go into making us, and we've shown a few of them here. So that might be our economic and financial situation, both past and present, our education as a child, and also learning we've undertaken as we've gone through life. It's the culture and society that we belong to, and our religion and our beliefs too. Families and relationships factor in there, as well as trauma that we might have experienced throughout our life. Of course, genetics has a big part to play in it, as well as the opportunities that may or may not be around for us. So all of these things and many more feed into us to make us who we are. We are a combination of all of those experiences and our DNA. So it makes us the unique people that we are. So all of those input are the big things, but what about the small things? So things that we haven't shown here, and they might be things that impact our mood on a daily basis. It could be the journey into work in the morning. It could be the boss is in a bad mood today. It could be, I feel really good because the sun is shining. But all of these different things inevitably have an impact on our thinking on a day-to-day basis. So we've shown the thinking there, and we've said that that's invisible because of course it is. Thinking is what goes on inside of our head, and nobody yet can actually see what that looks like. It's hidden. It's not there for people to see, but it's the processing that we do of all those external stimuli. And the output is the bit that is seen. It's the behaviors. It's what we do, we say, and our reactions. So that's the bit that people are aware of. It's our responses to all of these different things that we could consider as our input. So as we said, we're all very different human beings because we have different input and we have different thinking styles. However, what we can do is we can make a conscious decision to sometimes pause and think about what we're doing, our reactions, how our behaviors are, and also check our thinking. One of the things that I think is useful is something that we've drawn from Carol Dweck. So she wrote a book called Mindset, the New Psychology of Success in 2007. Now in that, Carol Dweck purported that there are two different mindsets. There's both a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Here, we're going to focus on the growth mindset because having that flexibility of mindset can be really useful, particularly when we're faced with huge change. And it is something that we can absolutely develop. So if we adopt a growth mindset, what are we saying? Well, we hold a belief that intelligence can be developed, that we can learn, that we can grow as human beings. If we hold that mindset, then that can lead us to a desire to learn and grow, and therefore a tendency to seek out and embrace challenges, to look for new things and new ways of doing things. And if we face challenges and if we face setbacks, then we're much more likely to persist if we adopt a growth mindset. We're much more likely to see effort as the path to mastery rather than a waste of time. And we're much more likely to be open to feedback. Hard as it may be to hear negative feedback, it's something that we could all learn from. And we seek inspiration and we find lessons where others succeed rather than seeing them as competition to us. So if we adopt this flexibility, if we embrace situations that might be new and sometimes a little bit frightening as an opportunity to learn and grow, then the outcomes can be a higher level of achievement and even a greater sense of free will, or certainly some control over our own destiny. I wanted to show this model to you. The circle of control is something we've adapted. It's based on Stephen Covey's work from his book in the late 90s, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So this model really looks and helps you to understand the things in your life that you have control over, the things that you have influence over, and the things which may concern you, but over which you don't have much control. I think this is a really useful model, particularly when we're faced with overwhelming and huge change, just as we are today, because we can get very easily caught up in the drama of everything that is going on around us, and it's not always a healthy thing to do for our mental well-being. So let me break down this model for you. Starting with the circle of concern. So that's the outermost circle in our model. So in that circle, we would put as individuals, and it will vary from person to person, all of the things that would concern us. They are of concern to us. Things like, we've got COVID-19 at the moment, of course. Things like the weather, the price of petrol. What about the traffic? What about actions of other people? So these are all things that we may feel impact us and concern us. Now, if we spend all of our energies on these things, then it's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. Outside of that circle, by the way, we would put all of the things that have no concern for us. So for me personally, might be things like jazz music or the automotive industry. So things that I'm not really bothered about. They don't really affect me personally. Okay, so let's move on to the next circle inside our model. So this one is the circle of influence. In this circle, we put things that are of concern to us and over which we can also have some degree of influence. So, for example, we've put in here the attitudes of people around me. So how might we influence the attitudes of people around us? We certainly can't control them, and they certainly may be of concern to us because they might impact our own mood and well-being. How can I personally influence the attitudes of people around me? Might be a question you ask yourself. Well, for example, we might choose to role model behaviors. We might choose to act in a way that is kind to other people. We might decide to reach out in a really giving way rather than to act in a selfish way. So all of these things we do, and we hope that they might influence in a positive way the people around us. So a couple of other things that I put in there, and you would have, again, your very own list in this circle, are things like the way I do my job. So the job itself might be bounded by a job description. You might have certain objectives and tasks that you need to complete. However, the way in which you choose to do your job is under your influence. It is something you can do something about. Equally, the way that your team operates together. So can you encourage the people to be collaborative, to be kind to one another, to reach out and to be helpful to one another? So all of these things are things that we can influence in a positive way. Now, by focusing some of our energies on the things that we can influence in a positive way, it makes us feel good. So it's good for our well-being too. So on to the central circle now. So this is the circle of control. Now, in this circle, we would put all of the things that we personally have control and power over. There's actually quite a lot in there when you really start to think about it. And I put a few examples in the circle here. So what do I have control over? Well, I have control over my attitude. So remember some of the models we looked at earlier in the session, our blueprint of human behavior, for example. If I check my thinking, if I check my reactions and my words and behaviors, then I can actually control that. So my attitude, my words and behaviors, my reactions are all things that I do have control over. How I treat other people, that's within my direct control. How active am I? Now, it might be difficult at the moment with COVID-19. A lot of us are housebound or allowed out at only a very limited time per day. However, we can choose to do something about that. There are lots of videos online, lots of things shared on social media, lots of free activity sessions, and that's all around exercise. Your diet, that's also something that you can control. So tempting as it might be to sit and eat biscuits all day, well, we can do something about that. We can choose to eat healthily. And the choices that I make in respect of other things, so how I spend my time, how I structure my day. So I have control over those things. So in this model, what we're saying is, if you focus your energies on the things that you can control and expand that circle as much as you can, pushing outwards, you can also use the circle of influence, and that would form part of that too. We can reduce that circle of concern, because if we're spending all of our time and energy focusing on the things that we have no control over and we have no influence over, then it's really damaging to our well-being. We can find ourselves falling into the trap of watching the news on a 24-hour loop, of constantly checking social media. And whilst there are certainly positives to come out of both of those things, doing it incessantly is not going to be good for our well-being. So really think about what you have within your control today, and really think about what you can do about those things. Make some positive choices. Take that time to stop and check your thinking and check your reactions and your behaviors, because you really can make a difference, not only to your own well-being, but to the well-being of the people around you too. So my final thought is, it might feel at the moment as if we are stuck between a rock and a hard place, with nowhere to go and nothing positive to do. But that's really not the case. if we just spend a little bit of time thinking about those things that we can positively influence and that we can change in a really positive way that are under our control, we can make a positive difference, as I say, to our own well-being and the well-being of others. So that's all I wanted to cover with you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found today's session useful. There are just a few contact details on the screen in front of you, so please feel free to reach out and share this as well with all of your friends, family, and colleagues. Take care, look after yourself. Goodbye.